This was me, 2 months into training for my first marathon, fresh as a daisy. And this was me moments before hitting the wall hard on race day. Since then, I've learned a lot. And in today's video, I'm breaking down what exactly I would do again if I were to run my first marathon all over again. Let's get into it. To start the video off, I thought I'd discuss some of the training mistakes that I made in my first ever marathon training. Overall, I went into my first marathon way too ambitious with the goal time I had set. Obviously, I thought I was in a good position, making sure I completed a majority of my training when in reality, I was nowhere near in sub 3:30 shape to be pushing that for my first ever marathon. And there were a few reasons that I completely neglected. My legs were in no shape or conditioning to actually run the full 42.195 kilometers, having only completed 60 or so kilometers as my peak week before the marathon, and only running 30 kilometers a couple of times before getting to the starting line. And as I learned the hard way, hitting the wall at 28 kilometers, my body just wasn't conditioned or ready to be an endurance runner just yet. I had zero base that I was working off of when training for the first marathon. Secondly, was experimenting a little too much with my nutrition to the point where I was actually umming and ahhing as to what my fuel sources would be coming up to the marathon. I'd focused way too much on the specific flavors. I remember getting a trial pack of Goose and having about 14 different flavors to try when in reality, it was actually the consistency of the Goose that I struggled with the most, ending up using Maurten gels for my New York City Marathon experience. And putting it simply, my biggest mistake was obviously just ramping up to the marathon distance without a real steady running base established beforehand. Yeah, running a couple of 5Ks every month or so may have benefited me a little bit, but not to the point where if I had been training, say, 6 months prior to completing my marathon training, would have had a much more beneficial experience, but also even race day experience when I got to the starting line. I will put a caveat here though that the marathon training program that I did complete, the Indigenous Marathon Project, was also designed in this specific way to really challenge and put you on such a steep learning curve to actually run your first marathon too. So it's a bit of a design flaw that's intentional in this way. So now in the following sections, deciding just how exactly I'd approach running my first marathon again if I had the opportunity. Obviously, you only run your first marathon once, but I'm hoping these sections are useful for you. Firstly is what the ideal training week looks like. Now, I'm a firm believer that strength training really does complement your marathon training. So I, in theory, if I were to run my first marathon again, would be aiming for between 4 to 5 runs per week, but also 2 strength sessions in the gym at a minimum as well too. I feel like if you could bump up the strength training to 3 times a week, that would be the gold star kind of objective. However, knowing that for people that have never stepped foot into the gym, twice a week can still feel like quite a lot of time added on to an already busy marathon training schedule. When it comes to the runs, obviously the staple is the long run at the end of each week. So usually on the weekends when all of us have a bit more time on our hands, ideally wanting to hit up to 32 kilometers, I feel personally, before getting to the marathon starting line. Ideally, in the middle of the week, you'd be looking to have a midweek long run in there just to continue building your aerobic endurance to allow you to run for a long period of time without stopping to and allowing your body to get conditioned to the fatigue that will occur during the marathon. While it's hard to put an exact distance, especially training for your first marathon on a midweek long run, I would be recommending anywhere between 12 to 16 Ks as an ideal sweet spot to really build your base up. You'd also want to be aiming for 1 quality session per week too. Now, the purpose of this one is really to improve our running economy, but also when we're adding our intervals or fartlek kind of sessions, building that lactate threshold that improves our body's ability to remove lactic acid over the course of the marathon. Some ideas for quality sessions can be interval sessions, fartleks, tempo runs, and even hill sessions like, for example, New York was full of sudden inclines and declines over a long period of time. Having hill sessions scheduled at the start of a marathon block would have helped me so much more. Lastly, for your remaining 1 to 2 runs to be done at an easy pace. Now, these will probably range from 5 kilometers to 12 kilometers in distance. Using my first marathon training as an example, I had a 5 kilometer easy run scheduled on the Mondays after my long runs, then using my Fridays as an 8 kilometer easy run before getting into my long run for the weekend. as I've touched on, also including 2 strength sessions on top of your 4 to 5 runs per week. Now, you don't have to be lifting ridiculously heavy or spending hours in the gym. The main purpose when it comes to your strength sessions is to strengthen any weaknesses we may have in the muscles that may actually impact our form over time during the marathon. I remember vividly in the final 5 kilometers of the race, I was hunched over, my legs were flopping out all over the place, and I just wasn't running economically well in terms of my running economy. So that was a really big red flag that I had when running my first marathon. Lastly, it's also very hard to put an exact number on what kind of weekly mileage people would want to be aiming for when training for their first marathon, but I would say in order to feel comfortable in running the entire marathon distance, you're looking between 60 and 80 kilometers per week. Anything above those kinds of distances, I really feel like you increase your risk in getting injured as well, especially if you're coming from minimal endurance kind of sporting or training background and wanting to suddenly sign up for your first marathon and try to complete it as well. I feel like it's a very cautious kind of gamble you need to make, and at the end of the day, you really just need to listen to your body as to what your peak mileage will be when it comes to your first one. So in this section now, I'm going to provide some advice and guidance around gear as well as nutrition when it comes to your marathon training as well as race day. Firstly, let's talk about shoes. Now, this will be the most important investment you will ever make on your running journey. Now, I feel like you need to start with a pair of maxed cushion shoes that will last you for a majority of your marathon training. These will take up a majority of your mileage each week, particularly when you get to your long runs, and you're probably looking at needing 2 pairs of maxed cushion shoes to get through, say, a 16 to 20 week marathon build, which is kind of the ideal time frame when training for your first one. If able to, I would also recommend buying an additional 1 to 2 pairs of running shoes to even out the mileage over the course of the week. Not only are you preserving the longevity of each shoe in being able to disperse the mileage across them, you're also reducing your risk of injury by getting into a different pair of shoes that kind of work different muscles in a way. So you're not just suddenly relying on one pair of shoes and having your muscles almost conditioned to run in that set of shoes, and as a result, even potentially leading to overuse injuries. Whereas if you're mixing between 1 to 3 pairs, you're constantly providing variety on your feet as well as your muscles and what's used during your runs. When it comes to apparel, both within training and for race day, honestly, wear what's comfortable for you. I don't have any preferences for brands that work better for race day. Honestly, it's an individual choice. Just be sure though to actually try out your race day outfit before race day itself. For nutrition, this again is quite an individual approach. Some prefer to use the gels, others much prefer the chews, and some even just actually prefer eating normal real food along their marathons. Again, it's an experiment that you will need to undertake during your marathon training to figure out. I would highly recommend using your long runs as training grounds to test what nutrition you will use come race day. If you are a salty sweater like myself, I would also consider investing in nutrition that is high in sodium. So this could be your electrolyte carb drink mixes that are on offer, but also even sodium tablets to ensure that you don't cramp up as much towards the end of your marathon. Lastly is to ensure you undertake carb loading before your race day. Now, I know recent studies are suggesting that runners may only need 48 hours worth of carb loading before their race to actually top up their glycogen stores, but honestly, I would lean on the side of caution and go the 72 hours. So 3 days before your marathon. Usually the first day you actually probably won't hit your carb loading intake, which is, I think it's 8 to 10 grams per kilo of body weight there. You just want to ensure that those next 2 days after the first one, you're really trying to max out as much as possible to have all the energy you can use come race day. While there's some good information on race week preparation, I feel like it's not quite commonly thought about when it comes to people running their first marathon, so I thought I'd also share some recommendations here in this section. Firstly is to organize your pre-marathon race dinner as soon as possible. Especially if you're traveling to compete in one of the world major marathons, restaurants and cafes are going to book out very quickly, and I experienced this in Chicago Marathon, I think it was 2 nights before the marathon and trying to find a place just to eat some pasta. So that can be deciding if you're booking a restaurant close by to your accommodation, or even deciding if you're actually traveling in from home, cooking a nice pre-race dinner meal at home before heading into the marathon the next day. You also want to pair this with organizing your race day breakfast as well, because obviously if you've got a ton of other runners hitting the town or wherever it's being hosted, they're likely going to be purchasing the exact same groceries as you want to be. So be sure to get your grocery shopping done for race day breakfast early. Lastly is to also be mindful of the time spent on your feet the day before the marathon. I know it can be easy to go out sightseeing or to want to hike up to a mountain that is near the course, but please be mindful that you need to conserve as much energy as possible to use come race day. Bunker down for the afternoon with your favorite movies, games, or even your favorite people if you like them too. And to conclude the video, some advice for first time marathoners. Firstly is you only run your first marathon once. It's such a unique experience that you won't actually ever get again if you decide to run additional marathons after your first one. Be sure to soak all of that in on race day. Secondly is to take in the finishing line as you cross, not only to celebrate the success of completing your first marathon, but also to witness the other runners around you and just that genuine human emotion around there. It's unlike any other place being at the finishing line after crossing a marathon too, and seeing that all these runners around you also completed the same difficult task of completing the marathon. My last piece of advice is to have a post-marathon plan. It's likely you will experience some post-marathon depression or blues coming from the highest of the highs completing your first marathon to suddenly going back to a bit of a normal routine and not really knowing what to do next. So if you can, add an additional 2 weeks on top of your marathon training plan to ease back into some sort of an exercise routine just to keep your brain busy, as well as when you start to figure out, okay, what's next? Do I want to train up for my second marathon, or do I want to spend some time doing shorter distances or another sport? It's a great opportunity to keep that momentum going without suddenly stopping and hitting that brick wall like, okay, what do I do now? So there we have it, friends. This is what I would do if I were to run my first marathon again. Now, I know your first marathon is quite an exciting experience, so I hope that you found these bits of information and advice useful if you are training for your first one as well. If you are training for your first marathon and still have some questions, more than happy for you to pop them down in the comment section below. I'm sure myself or some of the other amazing community members can help answer those too, with a wealth of experience across the running community here that we're building on the channel too. So that's really exciting. Just wanted to again thank you so much for all the love and support recently too. It's really exciting to see the channel starting to build a little bit of momentum, but also being small enough and quiet enough to have some really strong relationships and bonds with the community here. Really excited to see what's next. If you're relatively new here, you may be interested in watching my New York City marathon experience here, my first ever marathon that I ran, and yeah, quite the learning experience for me there. I'll leave it up here for you to check out if you want to. I'm Jack, and I'll see you next time. Catch up.